Welcome to another episode of Paranormal the New Normal, the show where we tell you that the normal is not what it seems anymore. And that cannot be further from the truth with this topic today. And my guest today, very excited to have her, Michelle Henderson from Michelle's Inspiration Hour, which, did I just mess that up or no?
You said that correct. That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, and she is here. We're here today to talk about intuitive children, which we're going to get into that in a minute. But first things first, how you doing tonight, Michelle?
I am doing fantastic. I don't know if you heard, but I live outside of Dallas and we got a lot of rain yesterday. So I'm able to talk to you not underwater.
Well, that's
So
always a
I
good
am,
thing.
yeah, so I'm feeling very good about that. So I'm doing great.
All right. Well, and actually, I did hear about that because another podcast friend of mine who does the Syphilis podcast lives in Texas.
Okay.
So yes, and she was telling us yesterday about how much rain you guys got, and I think we're about to get it right now. It's been thundering out for the last hour, but
We're sending you
hopefully.
that love. We feel like we need to share the rain with everybody.
Oh, we'll take it. We've had a dry summer here in the East Coast, but
Yes.
so first question I ask everybody on this podcast is, what got you into the paranormal, spiritual, supernatural world, whatever you want to call it? What got you into it?
It's one of those questions I wonder about as well because it's like I've always been interested in the paranormal, even as a kid. But when things start happening to you, not as severe like you see on TV. I didn't have
Yeah.
them, hurt me or anything else. The spirit hurt me. They'd let me know that they're there, but I've always been interested in the paranormal. I'd be the one that would go into the bookstore and look at all the fun books and watch all the TV shows, all about it. And of course, growing up, I didn't have YouTube to
Of
watch,
course.
but yeah, so as a little one, as a little girl, I could feel the different energies and everything. And I was very curious about it. And I was very curious about aliens and the different monsters. And of course, I've never really been in contact with aliens, but there are a lot of people that have. And so, again, I just love watching shows on it.
Yes, which I mean, I've actually had a few of those on the, or one of those on the show at least, that a star seed,
Oh,
and
right. Right.
so
Very fascinating, very fascinating. And I think it's very interesting that everybody has a different experience. Not all of us will experience the same paranormal experience the same. We may see it from different perspectives, and I find that fascinating. I think that's the way it should be.
yes, I mean, I do too. Everybody is brought into this world in a different way, and it's amazing. I mean, I myself, as everybody that listens to this show already knows, I never had any abilities I was sensitive to. I just was always interested in Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster and all that, and that I didn't like horror movies, but I liked all that stuff because it was cool. And as I got older, I started exploring the more psychic and spiritual side of it all. And I mean, just for me, it never clicked. I think it may be starting to, but I think I'm a long way off from ever actually being able to call myself anything. So I try not to call myself anything yet. But so we talked about this before the show started, kind of. But for the audience,
Mhm.
because I said we're going to talk about intuitive children, what do you define the word intuitive meaning in this example?
Okay. Oh, intuitive. Okay. So intuitive, it can mean so many different ways because the terminology is actually changing. Intuitive can be almost like very basic, that you have that intuitiveness about you as a human. You know when something is about to happen and it's kind of, when danger is about to happen and you've got that gut feeling and the intuitiveness. And so it's kind of a safe factor, right? It can also mean that if you're in tune into the spiritual world, which means that, and it's so funny, Jeremy, when you were talking about, I don't really have any gifts or psychic abilities or whatever, but I think they are beginning to appear. And I think everybody not only is in tune to the danger, but also in tune, spiritually as well. It just depends on when you want to say yes to it. So, being intuitive can also mean that you have the psychic abilities to be able to pick up on other people's different energies and just know what they're feeling, just have that knowledge, that type of thing. And then it can also mean mediumship, which is kind of still underneath that intuitive umbrella, where you actually are connecting in with people who have crossed over, more of the spiritual world. And, we could talk about this all day long, but I feel like everybody is born with it. But if you want to accept it and be a part of your life, that is your journey, as or you may choose not to. So, just like a lot of people will believe in ghosts and in Bigfoot, they may not believe in psychic mediums. It just depends on your journey.
Yes, I mean, truly it does, and I couldn't put it better myself. So, an intuitive child, how do we how can we tell when a child's going to be intuitive from a young age? And are there signs? I mean, I know they're not all going to be like Carrie or the Poltergeist, but
Oh, right. I know I tell people that's one reason why things started happening to me. I was scared because I, grew up with all that. I mean, all the horror movies of the 70s I grew up with, and I thought I'm going crazy and the devil is coming after me. But no, it is not. And like you said, I love how you said that. It is not like that at all. So, a lot of children that are in tune to the spiritual world, and they are so open because they don't have that judgment about things that are happening to them. Okay, so whenever your child comes to you and they say, Mom, there's someone in my room that, and they can maybe even see apparition, maybe a little boy's playing with me and we're playing a game, but I don't think he's actually alive, he's my pretend friend. As a parent, you're going, I don't know what to say about that. But as I tell all parents, have that conversation with your child. If your child is seeing apparitions and they're not afraid and they're excited about it, have that conversation. A lot of times, too, these children are empaths and they feel everybody's energy. Okay. I used to come home exhausted from school because I could pick up all my friends' energy and know how they're feeling. And a lot of times they cannot distinguish, is this my feeling or is this my friend's feeling, emotions that I'm feeling? So a lot of times they have a hard time distinguishing the way that they feel. So you'll see a lot of anxiety in these children. Okay. And then a lot of times they can actually see different auras around people, different colors. And they're going, they may not know how to describe it, but if you give a crayon to a child and tell them to draw what they're seeing, sometimes you can see the different lines that they create with the different colors. And then a lot of them will astro travel, especially when they're asleep. Okay. They have the most vivid dreams and they can visit different realities. And it's just, to me, that is really fascinating. Or another fascinating fact is that they remember something that has happened in their past life. And there's a reason why we don't remember things, because it will bring anxiety. And we're here to live this life, but sometimes they can pick up on things that happened to them in a previous life. But as a parent, just listen to them.
yes, which I agree. Quick shout out to Isla from V Team Paranormal and Marie. Thank you for watching. We appreciate being here. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to throw them at us, and I'll put them on screen. And of course, well, the first thing I'm going to say about that is you might want to check with your child and make sure there's not actually somebody in the room that shouldn't be there, a real
That's
life
true.
person. But I mean, that's the first thing. But because I mean, I've heard plenty of stories where people have thought their children was talking to an imaginary friend or something like that, and it ends up being like a homeless person that was living in the walls or
Oh,
in the crawl
right.
space for
Oh, I
years.
know. That's another horror movie in itself. But, that's one reason why I started looking into working with families with psychic children or intuitive children. It's because a lot of psychic mediums who decide to do it professionally as they get older, they were shut down as children. Okay. A lot of parents are going, we're not going to open up that doorway. And like you said, it's kind of like a fear, the fear of the unknown. And like you said, yeah, if I saw a homeless person in my child's bedroom, that would scare me to death as well. So
Oh, that would scare me more than a ghost would by
absolutely,
far. But
absolutely.
that was actually
And yeah.
oh,
Oh, I'm
well,
sorry. Go ahead.
no, no. Oh, that it's funny you said that about uh, parents naysaying children on this type of thing because I was just going to bring up the fact that we talk about it on this show all the time that people my age at least and older than me, we grew up and if we said anything like that to our parents, there was like, oh, that doesn't exist. Oh, that does like, oh, mom, I believe in Bigfoot. It doesn't exist. Like I believe in like I saw a ghost yesterday. No, you didn't. You were just it's your imagination. Like because I think because of the horror movies of when my parents were kids and anybody in my generation, like that's just the way it is. Like they didn't want to have anything to do with the paranormal because horror movies ruin the paranormal for people and they made it
Mhm.
seem scary all the time and like it'd be a hard thing to be around. So what I mean now it's a little more accepting. I hear this because parents who experienced things when they were kids now have their own kids and
Mhm.
they tell them like it's okay, it's not, it's just a spirit, they're not, hopefully, I mean it hopefully won't hurt you because I mean you don't always know but because there are some evil spirits out there as well, but usually I believe they're good intentioned or just
Mhm.
kind of neutral, just kind of hanging there, not really trying to mess with anybody. But
And I have a lot of
so
thoughts on that one. If you want me to tell you my personal thoughts on that and what I've learned too in the psychic medium world, most okay, spiritual spirits will be good. Okay, as long and they're not going to hurt you as long as you have that intention. If you don't have that intention or you're looking for it, like when we go into haunted homes or you're doing a paranormal investigation, sometimes you will run into lower energy spirits, but most of the time they are very good and they're not going to harm a child at all. Sometimes they'll feel uncomfortable because maybe the spirit was angry in their life and they're feeling that. But I mean, 99% of the time, they are not going to hurt a child
yeah, I mean
or
I can
anybody.
believe that.
Yeah.
I can believe that. So if that's the case, then why do you think parents keep denying when their kids why do you think parents keep denying them with their kids when their kids come to them with this thing with these all of a sudden these exclamations of, oh, I talked to this man in my room last night, this woman in my room last night, and I don't know, he was floating or he was see through or she. I mean, either way, like why do parents deny that nowadays even?
And I love that. And just kind of like what you said, as we grow up, we're kind of in that pattern and we're learn what society accepts and does not accept it. And of course, and I think a lot has to do with religion, not meaning all religion, kind of sways the truth sometimes, but sometimes people are fearful because that's what they grew up with. I grew up with because a lot of my parents and a lot of my friends would say, "Don't open that door. Do not open that door." And once I did, I'm so glad I did because to me, I'm more spiritual than I was without it. Okay. Because it's a part of me. But I think it's just the wiring that we go through as in a society and as churches or even, people, it's just being afraid. And I think the more that we know, the better. That's why I'm glad that we're having this conversation. Conversation is a big part. And I think a lot of podcasts, I think a lot of shows are beginning to shed the light on it. And I think people are beginning to open up and go, you know what? There is something more out there than being afraid. Okay.
Ye-
S-
yes, I agree. There is so much more. I mean, even compared to when I was a kid in the '90s, early 2000s. there is so much more in the paranormal world that is out there now than all these shows, Ghost Hunters and the 5,000 other variations of that show, all the Bigfoot, finding Bigfoot shows, all the different haunted possession shows, haunted house shows. Like, there's just so much more out there
Mhm.
nowadays than when I was a kid. And if I had these type of shows, my love for the paranormal wouldn't have died at a young age and had to get reinvigorated about 20 years later. Like,
Right.
it would have continued on, and maybe I would have some spiritual abilities at this point if I did that. I don't know. I don't know.
It's never too late. It's no, and you
Well,
still have it. You don't know what, you know what I'm saying? If you everybody has the ability, but a lot of times we don't tune into it because of, certain things in our lives. We're too busy and there's too many things going on, so we're not focused on it. But hey, I didn't start working professionally until I was 50. So, it's never too late.
no, it's definitely not too late. And Marie said, yeah, they can't cope with it, which is 100% true. That's why
Mhm.
parents try to hush their children when they talk about this type of stuff. Which
Absolutely.
which as a professional in this, what effects does it have on a kid when a parent tells them to shut
Oh,
this down? Like,
yeah.
what happens to the kid?
Well, and like I told you, it's a part of them. They're thinking they're excited about it because it is something spiritual that's going on. And it's almost like, you bring it home when you puppy, you're excited about it. So you're excited to share the story with your parents. And then that fear comes out and they can feel the fear, they're going to shut down. And because they shut down, as they become a little bit older, they will start exploring. And this can become dangerous after a while, especially if they start going to the wrong group or like what we're talking about, the different intentions, the lower energy groups that are worshiping other beings besides love and light. And so as teenagers, they want to be accepted. And that is a part of them. So if they're not accepted, they can also get depressed. They'll become into depression. They can also get into drugs. So there are a lot of things that can happen. That's why it's really important. It's just like anything else. If your child comes to you and says, "Mom, I'm having a hard time reading. I don't know what to do." If you go, "Oh, no, you can read," and then you like that, that's going to kind of create the same thing. That's a puzzle piece of them that you're shutting down where they can get help.
Yeah, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, haven't kids who were sensitive to this type of thing been misdiagnosed as autistic or many other mental illnesses, I'll say?
Well, yes, okay, and, that is a lot that's another a bag that we open, the misdiagnosis or whatever, but it is a part of them. So, yes, a lot of children with ADHD can have that sensitivity because they are vibrating at such a higher level that they can actually tune in very quickly. And then kiddos with autism, even our nonverbal children can communicate with spirit, and they can also communicate with others who are living telepathically. So while I was doing a lot of research, and I worked with children with autism, and as a behavior analyst, and when I was doing research about intuitive and psychic children, I was going, "Oh my gosh! I just saw one of the what my child did." Some of the symptoms that a psychic would do, like a lot of times, children that are nonverbal and are under the autism spectrum, they'll gaze off in the distance, and sometimes they'll just start laughing. And I'd always go, "What are you laughing at?" And to me, when I look back, there was somebody else in the room. Somebody was talking to them, in the spirit world. And I could feel the energy, but back then I didn't really know what was going on. So yes, and in the 60s too, we had indigo children. Okay, that's where the first um I guess term we could say for psychic children. And Nancy, I think her Nancy Nape, I believe was her name. I cannot think. I know her first name was Nancy. She was able to see auras of these children, and they were purple. Okay, indigo. So that's why the term indigo children. And she said that they were here on Earth was to help us spiritually. and were warriors. And a lot of these kids, as they got older, yes, were diagnosed with ADHD. So we've had children for a long time, and I think it's even before the 60s, but we just kind of put it under, the rug. We don't really talk about it. But these children have been with us for a long time.
Yeah, I truly believe that there's been people with these abilities since the beginning of time. Well, since the beginning of civilization, I'll say. I don't want to say beginning of time, but since the beginning of civilization, there's been these abilities have been slowly coming out more and more. And I believe what a lot of psychic mediums have told me over the last couple months that in the last 5 years, there's been a spiritual awakening happening in the world,
Mhm.
and especially with COVID, greatly made it increase because people were stuck at home with nothing to do but be by themselves a lot of the time, and they
Yes.
started to learn more about themselves, and they started to open their mind more to things. Possibly, if they listened to a podcast like this, and they might have heard an idea and thought, you know, that explains some things. But
Yes, absolutely. And I like what Marie said about scientists and mediums are coming together. And that is
yes,
absolutely true. And I love it. I love because, I think we're beginning to prove it. I don't want to, with validation and so forth. And I agree. And I think scientists have been trying to prove it for a long time. But I think with the technology and so forth that have really advanced, I think we're getting there. So, and scientists can't prove some scientific research without the paranormal items in it involved in it.
very true. And I actually have a co-host on another paranormal show I do called Global Strangeness,
Mm.
and she recently took a uh ast- astral what the hell is it called, astral planing. She took an
Yes,
astral planing.
Ezra.
She took an astral.
Ezra.
She took Yeah, she took an astral planing class like online, and there was actually a New York City detective in there
Hmm.
too taking it because he said that like more and more cops are relying on it to try to solve crimes. Like
Yes.
it,
Yes.
so when I heard that, I was like, "You're serious? Oh my,
Oh
that's
yeah.
amazing! That's
Yes.
amazing!"
Yeah, I totally, yes. And that's, it's very interesting because there are a lot of people that are beginning to offer courses like that. And it is so fascinating. I mean, you start with trying to find an object and then you go to finding missing people. So yeah, so I think it is fascinating. And I'm so glad that society is beginning to accept that. But like what you were saying about a spiritual awakening, I had a friend that actually reminded me that we had a spiritual awakening in the 60s, going back to the 60s. And it's almost like because of the COVID, that everybody, like you said, it stopped everybody. Everybody had to think. They started thinking spiritually. And I think people are beginning to be so much more spiritual than they used to be. And the energy shift is changing. And that's why we're having all these emotions and all these anger and all the love and everything involved.
Yeah, I agree. And Marie just agreed with me and said, yeah, that during the lockdown, we had the space and time to explore things without being interrupted or having to go to a lot of us not having to go to work. I mean, I was unemployed for most of the lockdown, so I 100% agree with that because
Right. I agree.
I couldn't find a job. I
Oh,
couldn't find a job.
I know a lot of people did. And they, a lot of time, I think we were able to think, I'm not happy there. I think I'm going to change something. I mean, that's when I came out as a psychic medium, on Facebook. As I went, I think it's time.
Yes, which I mean, I at that point I was this was obviously years before I started podcasting even, but I was unemployed and I just was home alone by myself a lot of the time, and it was just one of those things where you start reflecting inward and you start seeing what can you do differently now that you have all this time that you didn't have previously because you don't have to work 40 hours a week anymore. So
Right. Right.
or even more hours a week. It's a whole different world basically.
Hmm.
So what like when parents come to you to saying they think their children may be intuitive,
Hmm.
what's the like how do they come about it? Like how do they feel about it? Like is it a mixed reaction or is it all the same reactions?
I It really depends. Now, when they come to me, they either believe in it, because if they didn't believe in it, they wouldn't come, that kind of thing. But I have had a mom that came to me with her son, and she said, my mother is very intuitive as a psychic medium, so I totally believe in it, and he has it as well. And she was explaining what her son was going through, but she said, but my ex husband does not believe in it. And she said, I'm afraid he's going to shut it down. And my advice was, if you believe in it and he doesn't believe in it, allow your child to decide, as they get older, if they want to continue with it or not. But at least he's able to open to both worlds and understand both advices. So most everybody that comes to me already have a family member that has psychic abilities. They just want to make sure that they're doing everything that they possibly can. And usually I haven't been able, I haven't had to really see these families month to month. I only do like one call and I give them advice, and that's all they needed. So, they're looking for certain knowledge to help their child at where their child is.
Exactly, which I mean, as long as they're looking for the help, I mean, I'm sure are there people like you that go to like foster care systems and orphanages and all this type stuff where I mean, I know they're not called orphanages anymore, but
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
whatever they're called, like are there people
Yeah.
like you that go to
Children.
these places and just see if any of the children do need the help if they have the abilities?
Yeah, the only problem with that is you have confidentiality. So that's why a lot of times they need to come to you, if that makes any sense. So you can't really, and that would be a great thing to do. But a lot of times, and that's one thing that's kind of in the system where we have to wait for, like, I can't just go to a parent, and say, I think your child, because they may, it's they need to come to me for the help, if that makes any sense. That's just is where we are now as a society.
Yeah, I mean it's not like it was in the '70s where Dick Halloran could take Danny Torrance
No.
aside and be like, "You got the shine in my boy." Like,
That's true.
no.
Well, and it started in the 50s where a lot of people were, doing experiments on people, and I mean, it was awful, without their permission. And now, because of confidentiality and HIPAA, a lot of times we can't go into those institutions because of it. But you always hope that, like, a social worker or a psychologist, that are working in the field will reach out, to others. And there's so many psychic mediums, so many metaphysical stores now that you can go and get the help. A lot of times parents go, well, where do I go? And I'm going, you know what? We have the internet now that we used to not have. And you can get the help that you need by just reaching out.
And just to make sure any parents that listen to this get the right type of advice, what are some warning signs if they meet someone who's and they agree to let this person help their child, if the person says they're a healer or they're a psychic, what are some warning signs that if that person doesn't have good intentions to try to actually help the child, but to kind of put their own motivation on why they're helping the child?
Oh my gosh, I
If
love this question. Absolutely love it. All right, so whenever they seek help and they don't they don't whenever okay, so I'll say the light worker, okay? To say they went to a light worker. And if the light worker is not asking questions like, what do you believe in? Or, what's your religion? And getting some background information first about the child. What has your child been diagnosed with? How is this hurting your life? Just asking almost like clinical questions, I hate to say, like if you go to the doctor, and they start
yeah.
asking you questions. If this light worker just tells you, you need to get a crystal, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to make sure that the child, it's not their imagination, but just telling you without really getting your feedback and not feeling as a team member, that's where the red flag needs to go up.
Yeah, and I mean, because there are such a thing as bad psychics out there and bad mediums as well. I mean, there are
Yeah,
such a thing as bad ones who,
unfortunately.
I mean, I don't know who they think they talk to or who they represent, but I mean that depends on your belief system, of course. But it just
Right.
I've been told by a few that there are ones out there that are working for some nefarious forces, we'll say, that
Mhm.
don't want the best for humanity. So
Right. And, follow that intuition because a lot of times you can feel that energy. Just feel that intuition that you have and just, how the person presents themselves. If they say you need to buy a candle that's worth $200 so that you can get the evil spirits out, that's another red flag.
yeah,
Or they have spells, or yeah, I mean yeah. So that's not meaning that all that is bad. It's just whatever you're comfortable with, because some people would be comfortable with that. So you've got to go with what you're comfortable with and just feel that your intuition.
yeah, I don't think a lot of people would be comfortable buying a $200 candle, but
No,
other than
I think
that,
the only
yeah, I mean, yeah. Other than that, I can definitely see what you're saying because there are definitely people who would buy into this type of stuff and who themselves have evil entities around them at all times, and they just wanna, and they'll relate to the person they meet, and they'll want their children to work with that person because they relate to them, which
right, right.
even if they relate to them, it's not a good thing.
And another thing that just comes to mind is guidance. So if these people guide you instead of telling you what to do, because we have free will and they help guide you, that is the number one thing that you need to really look at, because you come to the person for guidance. But if they just, try to, suffocate you and tell you you need to do this and that and this and that, then, you need to second guess it, especially if you go to one for the first time and, you know, especially a medium, and they keep saying, oh, you're going to keep coming back, for so often, then that's another red flag that you should think about.
Well, yeah, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like this it's like the child psychologist that wanna see your kid 3 or 4 times a week versus seeing them once a week. It's usually not a
Right.
good sign. I
Right.
mean, if your child needs that much, then they would obviously already be in some kind of institution, not be at home still. So it's
Right.
just sometimes common sense plays into it a little bit. Where if it seems fishy, it probably is fishy. So
Right. But you know what's unfortunate? There are a lot of people that are gullible because they are so emotionally drained and they want the help and they don't know where to go to. So that's when it becomes unfortunate. But you think of everything else, there's bad doctors out there, there are bad psychologists out there. So, in every field, you're going to have somebody that's not very good. And that's why you need to talk to other people who have been to this person. Word of
yeah,
mouth is important.
which usually these people have websites that you can go to,
Mhm.
and there's usually reviews on them, or they
Right.
may even be on Google. They may even be on Google for God's sake. I mean, they might be on Google with reviews, so who knows?
Right.
Google the person. That's the best thing to do nowadays is Google anybody you meet that you want to know about, and you'll find
Absolutely.
if they're out there, you'll find something. So, what age is like when will a child start to develop, like really be able to show these abilities and understand what they're doing? Like, what age would you say that is?
Well, I mean, it it can start as early as when they're babies, because have you ever tried to pick up a baby and they're looking looking again past you at something else? But of course, you're not going to work on their abilities at that time, right? When they're younger, and it really depends on developmentally because every child is different. But up to the age of 10, a lot of times just talking to them, have them make journals, do yoga with them, meditate with them, all of this fun stuff as a family, just to help them. Because, I mean, yoga and meditation and breathing will help anybody. But as they become a little bit older, preteen, they can actually start, reading people or reading family members, looking at photos and doing psychic readings. And then when they become 16, they, to me, can start working as a psychic. because they can work in food places. They can get a job at 16. And a lot of 16-year-olds have more knowledge about life than I do. So it just really depends on the child. But you can start really working on their abilities when they are 10 years old to preteen, and doing little, because it's like anything else. You do little exercises to in tune and strengthen your ability. And that's what they can do as well.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, but does going through I'm sure going through puberty also affects this to a different degree, or no?
Absolutely, it does,
Yeah.
because, I mean, you're an empath, right? As a psychic, you're an empath. Then your hormones are all over the place. So, yeah, so it does affect, and that's when a lot of times, it's very interesting, and I love these so creative teenagers that change their hair color. I even see adults do it. But, they are so a lot of times you'll find a intuitive child or a psychic child that are so creative. They almost look gothic, but they're not really gothic, because they're just trying to find their identity. And I just love them to death because they are so imaginative and they're so fun to get to know. But yes, so a teenager, yes, it can affect them tremendously. But they can get through it just like anything else.
Yeah, which I mean, oh yeah, I just want to make sure that parents know that, like, be warned when when that hits, it's gonna be worse even. But
Yes, and because I think it may be even worse if they don't have the ability, because they're so emotional, they're so dramatic, and I mean it's so much fun because they are, so spiritual, so free, that they don't understand why no one else understands them.
exactly, which I mean, a lot of children already feel like when they become teenagers that no one understands them.
Yeah,
I
right,
mean, I know I felt it as a teenager, like that no one understands me,
right,
no one understands my music, my taste in movies. Like that's just the way it is. But
yes, yeah,
eventually you have to find that clique or that group that will agree with you. But and
right.
as Marie just said, trapped children, they never had the chance to express themselves because they're trapped in a certain lifestyle. I mean, back
Mhm.
in the older days, I mean, this didn't really happen to me, but I knew
Old
people.
I love how you say olden days.
Well, yeah, I
I'm
know.
sorry, go ahead.
A 34-year-old saying olden days. I mean, it's how I feel older than I am most days. But so these, I mean, I knew families where they were so religious, like either Christians or Catholics or Jewish, like doesn't matter what the religion was, but they're so religious they didn't let their kids do anything but school, home. That's
Mhm.
church in the middle there, like 3 times a week, 4 times a week. Like that's all they did. So these kids never had any chance to really explore who they were because they weren't allowed out in the world by themselves.
Mhm.
Like they literally would run from the bus to their houses. Like that's how controlled they were basically by the parents, is that they just ran straight home because they were scared what the parents would do if they didn't.
Right.
So
And it is a control issue. Exactly what you just said.
and
Yeah.
if a kid like that has any abilities, they're going to be most likely, I'm guessing, shut down deep in their mind at that
Mhm.
point, and it's going to take a lot to get those to reemerge.
Right. Well, and I think a lot of times you also may find a child that oppositional defiant and does it anyway. But again, that's kind of scary in itself because they may do things that are not with good intention. Um, and I know that we all say what we're talking about is they get shut down, but they can always reopen it later. It does not go away. Okay. That is a part of them. They just may kind of like a volume on a radio or, on anything, computer, whatever. You can turn it down and not hear anything. But you can also turn it up as you start working with it more and more. But you never shut it off completely.
I've heard that reference somewhere before too. I just can't think of. I'm pretty sure it was a Stephen King book, but I can't think of where it was. But I mean,
I love
I
Stephen King. Yeah.
I know, I do too. I'm actually in the middle of a Stephen King movie tournament on another podcast I guest on. So it's a fun. It's Stephen King and the paranormal go hand in hand for a lot of things.
Oh
So,
yeah. Oh yeah.
eh, but so what is the difference in these kids? I mean, same as if they have bad lives at home and their parents influence them to to stop this. What can happen if they're with a group of friends who find out they have like these types of abilities and they use them for bad purposes? Like if they try to use the kid to find the best way to like go rob a convenience store or find the best time to go rob a house, like that type of scenario.
And that's again is you're looking at morals, that kind of thing. So if a child is hiding it, a lot of times, like any teenager will, they'll try to, oh, this is cool, I'm being accepted, and I can do whatever I need to do. And it's almost like they have to find out for themselves, even though it's not good intentions when they're teenagers, they will eventually get caught. And spirit has a way of waking you up and saying this is not what you need to do. Does that answer your
Right.
question?
Yeah, I mean, kind of, but I mean, what if they're not listening to spirits yet? That's what I'm trying to get at. Like, what if they haven't been introduced to the fact that they actually have a spirit they can listen to that would tell them like what to do or what
They're
not to
gonna have
do?
they're gonna have a lot of tribulations. Let's just put it this way. They are going to experiment, 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 and eventually, hopefully, somebody will give them the knowledge that they need to get out of that. But, that's where you find the cults. A lot of times you get in those cults and they kind of persuade you, in the wrong way. So, a lot of times, if that's what they need to learn first, because sometimes you're better as a psychic medium if you go through a lot of tribulations and you go through hell and you go through certain pieces of life that other people have not gone through. Sometimes you're a better psychic medium to help others. I know it's so interesting, because whenever I'm at a holistic fair, I'll see people, approach different tables and they'll feel pulled to a certain person, a certain psychic. And I'll have a friend who went through alcoholism, went through the drug scene, and she'll get a lot of clients that are actually going through that. And she's able to help them spiritually. Where I get a lot of teachers. And which is so funny, teachers that are trying to find their way through life, or children as well. So everybody almost has that energy about them, and whatever they've experienced, spirit has a way of pulling people that have experienced the same thing to you.
Yeah, I mean, like minds, like attracts like. That's what I'm trying
Yes.
to say. Is like attracts like. I mean, I can I could be walking down the grocery store or down an aisle, and it's the same as if I just see someone like before I even see what they're wearing or anything. I'm just like, why does it feel like I know this person to some
Mhm.
degree? And it turns out we're both juggalos or we're both into the same rock band or something like that. Like it's just like somehow you connect and you realize it without even knowing the person.
Mhm.
I mean, I've made some of the best friends of my life that way just because just sitting across the room from them at a party, you're like, I like you. I don't know why, but I do.
Yeah.
Like it's just one of
That's your
those.
psychic senses. And
Yeah,
that
well,
energy. Yeah, absolutely.
and, and thank you, Marie. We appreciate having you. As Marie said, she finds us really interesting and she loves
Mhm.
us.
That's awesome. I
And
love her comments. Yes.
yeah, teachers have been here before. Yeah, I believe that. I'm a big believer in reincarnation and that.
Mhm.
I mean, teachers. It feels like teachers are always meant to teach for the most part. I mean, there's always some of them that are not. Like you get that feeling like they tried to be something else before they were a teacher and they failed at it. But because I mean, you can get that sense. I had it in high school too, where the teachers I loved, you could tell like they were meant to be teachers,
Oh,
which
right.
which I mean,
Absolutely.
and there's
It
the other ones where it's like, no, they shouldn't have been a
Oh,
teacher.
yeah. Well, like what we're talking about is that energy connection, that we all have. And I mean, have you ever like stood in a line to get like at the grocery store and you and somebody starts telling you about their whole life story because they feel comfortable around you? That again is that energy connection. You know, where our spirit team may be talking to one another, who knows? So yeah, I find
Yeah,
it fascinating.
I have had that. Then you also have the ones where they just tell you about their life story, and then as soon as you walk away, kind of weirded out by it, they start telling the next person they see about their life story as well. And those are the ones that are just like, okay, a couple screws loose, but okay.
Oh, that yeah, and that just kinda tells me that's a lonely person just trying to get that attention too. Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
But what? Depending on the time I have, maybe I'll give them attention, but it depends if the time is right. I mean, if I
Right.
have to be, if I gotta be somewhere and I'm on lunch or something, then yeah, it's not gonna happen that time, buddy. Sorry. If you catch me, you catch me after work coming out of a bar, then maybe. But
Right, right. You know, another
and
thing oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead, please.
Oh, well, what I was gonna say too, the one thing that we haven't talked about with children is they love animals. You know, they have that animal connection and they just know what the animal is thinking a lot of times or feeling if they're not feeling very well. I just, you know, and I think it's fascinating that there's a lot of psychics that can kind of tune into that type of energy.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because well, I was gonna ask. I mean, because you were a teacher for many years, I believe, right?
Hmm. Yes.
And I'll get to that question in a minute, but yeah, every child has an animal that they love. Like you ask any child in the world, what's your favorite animal? They have an
Hmm.
answer for you.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, you can, yeah. And I mean, my kids sometimes, like my son will be like, we have two mastiff puppies that are both under a year, and he will, yeah. And they're as much as I can't stand them because they have to clean their freaking cages out every day, but
Yeah.
my son will be like, "Oh, he's not happy right now, or she's not happy right now because we have a boy and a girl," and like he'll tell me that, and I'm like, "Oh, what are you talking about? They're fine." And all of a sudden they start growling or something or barking at something, and there are
Hmm.
spirits in my house. There are two
Oh, yeah.
spirits living in my house.
Oh, yeah.
So like
That's another way.
as soon as my son says, "Oh, the dog's not happy right now," I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Then he'll start barking. I'm like, "Okay, you're right. You're right. Don't yell at me, Munchkin. I was just trying to figure out what he was talking about." But
Right.
so the question I was going to ask is what all your years of being a teacher, what is the most important lesson it taught you about children?
Just overall?
Well, I mean, you can go into whichever direction you want with that. I like to leave it a
Oh,
little bit open
okay,
on that
okay.
one.
The one thing that really I mean, after you asked me that, what really came to mind was really, you know, like I keep saying, you need to listen to them, respect them, you know, of who they are, because each one of each child, you know, we'd have what, 21 kids in the classroom, and each one was so different. And yet they each were such a dynamic personality, and I keep calling it a puzzle piece, but to the classroom, each one of them was such a gift to have. And I think we all need to respect them and not really treat them like they don't know anything as a child, but respect their personality and who they are as a person.
Yes, which I mean, it's hard to do because like there are certain things my son does that piss me off to no end. Like when he's just sitting in his room playing video games and
Uh-huh.
he'll start singing random songs he made up at the top of his lungs when I'm trying to watch TV or something. And I'm just like, Jerry, shut up, please.
Well,
Like
good.
sing quieter so I don't have to hear it like over my TV. Like I don't care if you sing, like sing your heart out, but
Right.
just do it a little quiet, do it a little quieter. Like I
Well,
don't need to
they
hear it.
yes, children need boundaries as well. They need parenting
Yeah.
and boundaries. So, not meaning that because in the classroom, I mean, it's like a mini family. You know, I would kind of I wouldn't tell the kids to shut up because you know that's not allowed. I would just kind of go about doing it in a different way, in a creative way. But they do need to have the boundaries, and they needed to be disciplined at certain times to know that's not how we behave because that's you know that's how we are as kids. They need to learn and they need that direction. But yes, so I know I completely understand. I raised three myself, And I think, now I could be wrong, and everybody listening, I think girls were so much more difficult to raise than boys. But
I
again, it
agree.
depends on the personality, you know.
Oh, I agree. My 5-year-old girl is a terror compared to my 8-year-old son. So, and she is such the drama queen. If you tell her
Yes.
no, she'll run through the house, falling constantly, just trying to like get you to feel sympathy for her.
Yes.
And you have to sit there and listen to her fall and scream and cry and be like, I can't help you. I can't, because then it's letting you know that this is okay behavior and I can't do that. No. Like I'm not dealing with this for another 18 years.
Yes.
But
Yes. So we're talking about your kids. Do you see any type of abilities with them?
I mean, my son, my daughter, not yet, no. But
Hmm.
I mean, if she does, she keeps it to herself and doesn't tell
Right.
us. Because
Right.
I've asked her like if she has seen anything weird in this house before, and she'll just kind of like laugh and run away. But my son has stayed at his aunt's house about a month or two ago, and their house
Mhm.
is very haunted too, down the Bridgewater Triangle of Massachusetts. So
Yeah.
like the first night he was there, he was telling his aunt like I can't, I'm scared, I can't fall asleep, I keep seeing ghosts,
Yeah.
and their house is known to have it. So I mean,
Right.
we everybody believed him, of course, but it's just, and they grew up before they moved in with me when they were just living with their mom. They
Right.
grew up in a house in the another house in the Bridgewater Triangle where it was on Native American burial ground, so they grew up with weird stuff happening in that house constantly.
Right.
Like
Right.
like so they're used to it in some degree, like more than I ever was used to it. Because I mean, I still haven't seen anything in this house, but the stories that my wife and her family have told me about this house from when they've been here is enough to keep me like looking around every corner as I'm walking through the house and whatnot. But it's
Right.
creepy.
Well, and that's, and that's a thing that you say, because it is kind of fearful when you're not, when you can't really communicate with them or you can't see them or, when you feel them, you don't know what to do. So there is a lot of fear based in it. But sometimes I just want to watch humans and see what's going on.
Yeah, which that we actually had paranormal investigators come in back in December because
Hmm.
I bought this house in November, and then after my wife saying she's seen enough weird stuff, like we wanted to get investigators in here, but for for get for shit and giggles for me basically, and
Hmm.
because it was free, so I was like, why
Okay.
not?
Yeah.
So they came in and like that's basically what they determined when they were talking to the spirits is that they were the original couple that lived here and built this house, and they never had kids, so they're here just watching the kids,
Hmm. Yeah.
which
Yep.
which to me in some ways was creepy because of things I was seeing in my daughter's room at night with shadows and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, and basically it was. I actually had a spirit talk to me that night for the first time ever, and it was literally bone chilling, but it was also amazing at the same time.
Now, did when spirit talked to you, was it in your mind or what, telepathically, or was it outside? Does
I'm
that
not
make sense?
sure. I'm not. I'm not sure because it talked. It said thank you to me, and I could have swore I heard it right outside my ear, like, but no one
Okay.
else in the room
So
heard
kind
it.
of more like a whisper.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
exactly like a whisper. I mean, because I was asking them, we were asking them like, do you like all the improvements I made to the house since I bought it? Because this house was built in the '60s, and I had to do a lot of upgrades before I could move in, even. So, and that's when I got the thank you was after I asked them that question. And it was like tear provoking and everything else too. It was just insane. But
And see that, yeah, and see that's how they. When I was going through my spiritual awakening, is I could hear them in another room. It was like a group of spirits, and they kind of I could feel their energy coming closer and closer and closer. And but a lot of times when they would communicate, I could hear them telepathically, but you can hear it as a whisper as well. So that's very interesting. And they said thank you. That's great.
at least one of them did, and it's weird because at the same time the investigators taking a picture of me like right when this is happening, and I'm standing up and like in between my arm, like right here in between my arm and my body, you could see like a kind of a face in the pictures. And I mean,
Wow.
some people see it when I show them it, some people don't see it. I can't. I
Right.
see it, but
Right.
I but I but yeah, I mean, I just that's my personal experience with it, and that's what got me into it. Well, not got me into it. That's what reinvoked my believing in it even more. So
Your curiosity. I love what Marie said. about her daughter is in contact with her sister that died 3 years before she was born. And
I saw
that is
that.
awesome. That is a gift, that that I guess it would be her aunt then. Is that correct? My daughter is contact with, yeah, okay. So, oh no, her sister. Okay. I'm sorry, I read
Yeah.
that wrong at the very beginning. But yeah, that is definitely a gift. And you'll find out that it will be come and go. Sometimes you won't hear from her for a while, and it doesn't mean that she's not there. It just means that your daughter has to live her life the way that she needs to. And it's almost like during a period of time she may need to hear from her and she'll be right there. So a lot of times our loved ones will just kind of stay with us until we need them, but we've got that free will and they're not supposed to interfere in our life at all. But that is definitely a gift. That is awesome. I love to hear that.
Well, before we wrap this up, I did have a couple questions I wanted to throw at you since I like to throw these at everybody who's a
Okay.
medium or psychic.
Uh-huh.
What do you think of shadow people? Because they're not a lot of people don't see them as traditional spirits, like in the sense, like a lot of people believe there are other types of things that are shadow people. So, what's your theory?
It's very, yes, to me, it's very interesting because you do hear different stories. I've seen it on shows where they're saying that they're different from different dimensions. That spirit people are coming to visit, and then I've heard also from people who do paranormal. Like you said, homes or institution investigations, and they'll see a spirit person and they think it's evil. Okay, now, from a psychic medium point of view, now what I've heard from my mentor is that they're earth spirits. They're lower energy that won't hurt you, but they're kind of like trapped here on earth. And so they have that a lot of the anxiety and so forth that, I don't know what to do, and they may be angry. So they come across as shadow people. So it just, and so where do I go on that? I'm not for sure because I haven't experienced that yet, but I do love hearing the different perspectives. To me, I would like to see it more of, I guess, psychic medium, is what they see it as an earthbound spirit just trying to find their way.
That's an interesting theory, actually, because I always pose a theory on here that I think that when people die, their spirits go through like
Hmm.
an evolution, to put it the best way, and that a shadow person is kind of like the medium way evolution state between just being
Hmm.
like a wisp or a ghost light,
Hmm.
and before becoming a full body apparition. I
Right.
think it's
Right.
to me it's that the spirits are learning enough to take shape of their form, but they can't make themselves look like real humans yet. They can only make themselves look like a shadow of a human.
Right. Right. I
That's
get you.
that's always been that's always been my theory, at least. But
Yeah, I like
I've
it.
been told I've had people on the show straight tell me, "Oh no, you're wrong about that." And I'm like, if you say so, like whatever
Well,
you
yeah,
say.
and I don't think it's a right or wrong. I mean, I don't think we're going to have to prove it one way or the other. I just feel like you need to know your own truth. That's how you see it, and that's truth for you. So,
I mean, I've also
yeah.
had I've had a paranormal investigator in Pennsylvania tell me that on the show that he's had to help families for years when they've had
Mhm.
shadow people in their house because shadow people supposedly drain them of their life and their
Oh, yeah.
energy, and the house ends up like the parents end up getting divorced eventually.
Oh, wow.
Having har- they end up having horrible relationships with the kids eventually if it's not taken care of. Like because they'll shadow people in his mind feed off your negative emotions and they make them grow so they can have more food. I mean, because if you're
Oh,
living
I can
somewhere and you want
understand
food,
that. Okay.
yeah. So I
Yeah,
mean, that's something he told me. I was like, I mean,
that's
yeah, I
interesting.
kind of could see that. I could see that because I
Mhm.
mean, it's interesting because like the one my wife's house where she lived before we moved in together, they had shadow people there, and her family was always arguing, very unhappy, and it made
Oh, yeah.
sense that something like that could be going on. So I don't know,
Right.
kind of some lines I drew. But the last question I got for you is: Do you do you believe that sometimes these things that talk to children could possibly be demonic or underworldly creatures in some sense, or just like evil creatures?
I don't. I really don't believe that a lot of it is to not, trying to, what we say, trick the children. Is that what you mean? Kind of saying,
Well, all right. I don't like the word demon because I'm
yeah,
agnostic, so
right.
I don't put my hand out to any faith and say I believe in your faith, but I just so I don't. You're not going to offend me with your answer, so don't worry about that.
Yeah.
If that's
No,
what a
no, no.
problem
Oh,
with.
I see what you're no, I and to me too, and the one thing that just came to mind is I think a lot of our children, and I think a lot of us are protected by angels, depending on if you like that or not. And I think the intention is that most everything is love and light, and I think a child is from love and light, but I really do not see anything dynamic, what am I trying, evil, trying to persuade them in any way. Um, but yeah, so no, I don't. But I know that, it depends on who you talk to and their experience. But I don't. And I feel like if a parent does feel like there is something like that, that by all means, they are in control of the energy in their house. And so they can tell that spirit to go away. They can do, energy cleansing and all that. But I don't think it's evil.
All right, I mean, I respect your answer. Everybody has
Yeah,
their own different beliefs on this, and that's why I like
right.
to ask mediums and psychics this because I've had ones that straight up tell me, "Oh, demons exist." They're like, I have angels talking to me, but demons exist 100% because I've had them try to get into my life through people. So,
Oh, right.
eh,
Right.
yeah,
Right. That's their
and
experience. Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah,
understand.
everybody's experiences are different, and on this show,
Right.
we respect all experiences 100%. So,
Mhm.
but before we wrap up, please tell the listeners where they can find your book, where they can find your podcast, and anything else you want to put out there
Oh,
into the world.
sure. If they go to my website, that's where, it's like shop all, that's where all the information is. So it's just www.michellehendersonmedium.com. And that's where you can find my book, where you can find the podcast, where all links to everything.
And I will, of course, share that link in the description of this episode well when I release it as a podcast. So I will, of course, put that in there. And I want to thank Michelle for coming on because it's been a very interesting hour for me. I've learned a lot about, I like to learn about children because I think my children may have abilities eventually. So
Mhm.
I like to be ready for
Oh,
it.
yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Knowledge is
yeah,
powerful. And thank you so much for allowing me to be on and having this conversation with you.
not a problem. And as all my listeners know, you can find me on Facebook as the Paranormal New Normal / Maniacal Music Musings podcast Facebook group. Everything I do is there. Feel free to go there, and you can get me. You can check me on Twitter and Instagram as @Juggalo Bastard. And until next time, thank you for listening, and I will see you tomorrow with another show live for any watchers. And thank you, Marie, for thanking us. I appreciate it. I'm sure Michelle does as well. So thank you.